You already know exactly when it started. Not the big betrayal you keep pointing to when you tell yourself the story. Something smaller than that, and much earlier. A moment where someone pushed, gently, just to see what would happen, and you didn't push back. You smiled instead. You said it was fine. You told yourself you were being easygoing, low maintenance, the kind of man nobody has to walk on eggshells around. And somewhere behind that smile, something quietly recorded the information that mattered. This one doesn't hold a line. This one can be moved. People don't stop respecting you because of one dramatic event. They stop respecting you the way water stops respecting stone, one small erosion at a time, until one day you look up and the shape of you has changed so gradually you can't even point to the moment it happened. You just know that the man who used to get consulted is now the man who gets informed. The man who's no used to mean something is now the man people negotiate with, automatically, without even registering they're doing it, because your history has already taught them the negotiation always works. Maybe it was your father, teaching you without a single word that a real man absorbs whatever gets thrown at him and calls the absorbing strength. Maybe it was a woman who learned, early, that if she pushed hard enough and waited long enough, you'd eventually cave, and filed that discovery away the way people file away anything useful. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of every group chat where you agreed to the plan you didn't want, every family gathering where you bit down on something that deserved to be said, every version of yourself you handed over in exchange for a peace that was never actually peace, just postponement with better manners. You can probably name the exact people. You've just never let yourself sit with the full pattern of what they've learned about you, because the pattern is uncomfortable in a way the individual moments never quite were on their own. Stay with me, because I'm not going to hand you a script for becoming colder or harder or more distant, the way most advice on this topic tries to. That's not what boundaries actually are, and men who mistake coldness for boundaries usually end up more alone and no more respected than they started. What I'm going to hand you is older and more precise than that. A method, tested by men who faced pressure to bend that would have flattened you and me both, and never did. Here's the truth underneath all of it, the one that's uncomfortable enough that most men avoid looking directly at it. You trained people to treat you the way they currently treat you. Not maliciously. Not even consciously, most of the time. But every time you said yes when your entire body was screaming no, every time you absorbed something you should have named out loud, every time you let the discomfort of a confrontation outweigh the cost of what you were actually agreeing to, you were teaching the people around you exactly how far they could go. And they learned the lesson perfectly, because you taught it perfectly, over and over, for years. This isn't about blame. It's about leverage, because if you built this pattern, you can unbuild it, the same deliberate way you built it in the first place. The Stoics understood something about boundaries that almost nobody discusses today, because it isn't about the other person at all. It's about the relationship between your judgment and your will, and the moment you actually understand that relationship, the entire game changes, permanently, starting today. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire filled with men who wanted things from him constantly, favors, access, exceptions, the erosion of his own standards for their convenience, and he held the line without becoming cruel about it, because he understood something you're about to understand. Epictetus, born into slavery, taught that no external force, not even a whip, not even a chain, could actually reach the part of a man that decides what he will and will not accept internally. Seneca, surrounded his entire life by flatterers and manipulators fluent in exactly the tactics still being used on you right now, wrote extensively about the specific discipline required to remain unmoved by them without becoming unreachable in the process. None of them were naturally immune to pressure. They built the immunity, the same way you're about to start building yours, one deliberate practice at a time. Number 1. The discipline of the dichotomy of control, applied to other people's reactions. Here is the sentence that will end more of your people-pleasing than any other single idea you'll hear this year. Their reaction to your boundary is not up to you. It was never up to you. You do not control whether she gets upset when you say no. You do not control whether he calls you selfish for finally protecting your time. You control exactly one thing in that entire exchange, which is whether you hold the line or collapse it, and you've been spending years trying to control the uncontrollable half of that equation while neglecting the half that was actually yours. Think about the last boundary you almost set and then quietly abandoned, not because you changed your mind, but because you could feel the disappointment forming on the other person's face before you'd even finished the sentence, and you couldn't stand being the cause of it. That disappointment was never actually your responsibility to manage. It was theirs, and by absorbing it for them, you taught them they'd never have to manage it themselves, which means you'll be absorbing it again next week, and the week after that, indefinitely, until you finally stop. Epictetus taught this from inside actual bondage. If a man with no legal control over his own body could still locate absolute control over his own judgment, the excuse that someone else's reaction is too painful for you to withstand does not survive contact with his example. Picture the last time you rewrote a text message 4 separate times before sending it, softening a simple no into something closer to an apology, just to preempt a reaction that hadn't even happened yet. You spent real minutes managing an emotion that belonged entirely to someone else, in advance, before they'd even had the chance to feel it. That's not consideration. That's you doing another person's emotional labor for them, unpaid, indefinitely, and calling it kindness because the alternative felt too exposed. Today, the next time you feel a boundary forming and the urge to soften it before you even speak, ask yourself one question. Am I about to take responsibility for a reaction that was never mine to manage? If the answer is yes, hold the line anyway, and let the reaction belong to the person having it. Drop this affirmation in the comments right now. Their reaction is theirs. My boundary is mine. Number 2. The discipline of the reserve clause applied to relationships. Every relationship you protect by abandoning yourself was never actually secure to begin with, it just felt secure, because the abandonment hadn't been tested yet. The Stoics held every external attachment, including relationships, with a silent clause attached. I will love this person fully, fate permitting. I will show up for this friendship completely, fate permitting. This isn't detachment. It's the specific discipline that allows you to give fully without staking your entire identity on someone else's continued approval of you. Most men do the opposite. They attach so completely to being liked, needed, approved of, that any relationship threatening to end over a boundary feels like a threat to their actual survival, not just their comfort. That's not love. That's dependency wearing love's clothing, and dependency cannot hold a boundary, because a boundary always risks the thing the dependency can't survive losing. Seneca warned specifically against this kind of attachment, not because relationships don't matter, but because a man who needs a relationship to survive has already handed the other person a leash, whether either of them has admitted it out loud yet. The reserve clause doesn't weaken the relationship. It's the only thing that makes a relationship built on your actual self, instead of your compliance, possible in the first place. Think about a relationship you're currently over-functioning inside of, agreeing to things you resent the moment you've agreed to them, purely because some quiet part of you believes the relationship might not survive an honest version of you. That belief has never actually been tested, because you've never given the relationship an honest version of you to respond to. You've been protecting a bond that was built on a performance, and calling the protection love. The next time you're about to abandon a boundary to protect a relationship, ask yourself honestly, am I protecting this relationship, or am I protecting my fear of losing it? Those are two different questions with two very different answers, and only one of them deserves your boundary as collateral. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I give fully. I do not give myself away. Number 3. The discipline of premeditated confrontation. Most men get ambushed by boundary violations because they never rehearsed the moment before it arrived, which means when it does arrive, in real time, under pressure, with someone's eyes on their face waiting for a reaction, they freeze, cave, or overcorrect into an anger that costs them more credibility than the violation itself ever would have. The Stoics rehearsed hardship deliberately, every morning, and you can apply the exact same discipline to the conversations you already know are coming. You know the ask that's coming. You've known for weeks. The favor that's going to be requested again, the boundary that's going to be tested again by the same person who's tested it successfully every single time before. Stop waiting to discover, live, under pressure, what you're going to say. Rehearse it now, calmly, specifically, the exact words, the exact tone, until the moment arrives and you're not improvising under fire, you're simply executing something you already decided while your mind was clear. This is the difference between a boundary that holds and a boundary that collapses the instant pushback arrives. A rehearsed line survives pressure. An improvised one rarely does, because pressure is precisely the condition improvisation performs worst under, and you already know this from every single time you meant to say no and somehow, in the moment, said yes instead. You already know exactly how it goes the next time, because it's gone the same way every previous time. The ask arrives, casual on the surface, and something in your stomach drops half a second before your mouth agrees to it anyway, betraying, in real time, the exact gap between what you wanted to say and what actually came out. That gap isn't a character flaw. It's an unrehearsed muscle, and unrehearsed muscles fail under pressure every single time, regardless of how much you wanted them to hold. Tonight, pick one conversation you know is coming, and rehearse your response out loud, twice, until the words feel like yours instead of a script. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I meet nothing today that I haven't already rehearsed. Number 4. The discipline of the obstacle as the way, applied to the people who test you. Every person in your life who consistently tests your boundaries is, without meaning to, handing you the exact resistance required to finally build boundaries strong enough to hold against anyone. You've been resenting them for the test. You should be recognizing what the test is actually building in you, because ease never forges anything, and the people who push hardest are, against their own intentions, forging you. Marcus Aurelius wrote about difficult people specifically, at length, not as obstacles to be avoided, but as material to be worked with, the same way a blacksmith works difficult metal instead of discarding it for being harder to shape. The manipulative coworker isn't in your life by accident, from this angle. He's the specific resistance currently required to build the version of you that doesn't fold under manipulation anymore. The relationship that keeps demanding more than you should give isn't a mistake to regret. It's the exact terrain where your discipline either gets built or doesn't. This doesn't mean staying in something toxic out of gratitude for the lesson. It means recognizing that the discomfort of holding a boundary against a difficult person is not a sign something's wrong with you. It's the exact sensation of the muscle actually being built, in real time, the same sensation every man before you has had to move through to get to the other side of it. Think about the one person in your life you've privately labeled exhausting, the one whose name appearing on your phone still makes your shoulders tighten before you've even answered. Now consider, honestly, how much sharper your boundaries have become specifically in response to them, compared to how they were before that relationship started testing you this consistently. The sharpness didn't come from anywhere else. It came directly from the friction, the exact friction you've spent months resenting instead of recognizing. Look at the specific person currently testing you hardest right now, and instead of only resenting them, ask what holding this particular line is going to prove you're capable of holding from now on. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Every test is training. I am not being punished. I am being built. Number 5. The discipline of the inner citadel applied to guilt. There is a place inside you no manipulation has ever actually been able to reach, no matter how skilled the manipulator or how convincing the guilt has felt in the moment it landed. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, and guilt, weaponized guilt specifically, is one of the most common tools used to breach it, precisely because it works on almost everyone who hasn't located their own walls yet. You know the exact sentence. After everything I've done for you, you're really going to do this to me? I thought you cared more than this. Sentences engineered, sometimes consciously, sometimes not, to make holding your boundary feel like committing a betrayal instead of what it actually is, which is simply refusing to keep abandoning yourself for someone else's comfort. A man without a located inner citadel experiences every one of these sentences as a direct hit to his actual character. A man who has found his simply notices the tactic, checks it for anything genuinely true, and remains, underneath the guilt, exactly as intact as he was the second before it arrived. This is not about becoming immune to genuine accountability. If you're actually wrong, the citadel doesn't protect you from that, and it shouldn't. It's about learning to distinguish manufactured guilt, deployed specifically to move your boundary, from actual conscience, which very rarely shows up disguised as a threat. You know that specific silence, the one that arrives right after you've said no and the other person doesn't argue, doesn't raise their voice, just goes quiet in a way engineered to make the quiet feel like your fault. Your chest tightens. You start composing the apology before you've even confirmed you did anything wrong, purely because the silence has done its job, the way it always has, on you specifically, more than it should. The next time guilt lands after you've held a line, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, is this guilt pointing at something I actually did wrong, or is this guilt simply the cost of someone not getting what they wanted from me? Those are different feelings wearing the same disguise, and learning to separate them is most of this entire discipline. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Manufactured guilt does not reach what actually matters in me. Number 6. The discipline of voluntary discomfort applied to disappointing people. Comfort with being liked, left unchallenged, quietly becomes one of the most expensive addictions a man can carry, because it costs him a small piece of himself every single time he chooses it over what he actually needs to say. The Stoics deliberately practiced discomfort in controlled doses specifically so it would stop having power over them in moments they couldn't control, and disappointing someone on purpose, occasionally, deliberately, is one of the most underused versions of that exact practice. Most men have never once chosen to disappoint someone on purpose, in a low-stakes moment, simply to prove to themselves they can survive the discomfort of it. Which means the first time it actually matters, in a high-stakes moment, with real consequences attached, they're improvising with a muscle that has genuinely never been used before, and it fails them exactly when they needed it most. Remember the last time you agreed to something you didn't have the time or energy for, purely because saying no felt like it would cost more than the thing you were agreeing to actually cost you. Run the math honestly. The favor took an afternoon you didn't have. The resentment it left behind lasted considerably longer than the afternoon did. You didn't actually save yourself anything by saying yes. You just moved the cost to a currency that doesn't show up on a calendar, and paid it anyway, quietly, the way you always do. Practice this deliberately. Say no to something small this week, something you'd normally cave on, purely to feel the discomfort of someone's disappointment and discover, firsthand, that you survive it completely intact. That evidence compounds. The next no gets easier. The one after that gets easier still, not because the discomfort disappears, but because you've proven to yourself, directly, that the discomfort was never actually dangerous. Choose one low-stakes no today, and hold it, even when the urge to soften it into a maybe arrives exactly the way it always has. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I can disappoint you and still be a good man. Number 7. The discipline of the evening reckoning applied to boundaries. At the end of each day, ask yourself specific questions before you sleep. Where did I hold a line today that I would have collapsed a year ago? Where did I still fold, and what specifically made me fold in that exact moment? What will I do differently the next time that same person tests me the same way, because they will test you the same way again, almost certainly, because it's worked on you before. This is not self-punishment. It's closer to a commanding officer reviewing the day's operations, oriented entirely toward the next decision instead of shame about the last one. Most men never actually review their patterns around boundaries at all. They simply keep folding in the same predictable ways to the same predictable people, accumulating years of it, until they wonder, distantly, why respect keeps draining out of their relationships without ever locating the specific, repeated leak. Think about how many nights you've replayed a conversation where you folded, not to learn from it, just to relitigate it uselessly, arguing with a version of the moment that's already over and can't be changed by any amount of replaying. That's not review. That's rumination, and rumination extracts a cost without ever handing back a lesson, which is exactly why the same pattern keeps repeating with the same people, undisturbed by all those wasted hours of replaying it. The evening reckoning interrupts that drift, deliberately, every single night, before it compounds into another year exactly like the last one. Tonight, ask yourself the 3 questions, honestly, and let the answers inform tomorrow instead of just accumulating as evidence against yourself. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I examine where I folded so I fold there once and never again. Number 8. The discipline of memento mori applied to who gets your time. You are going to die, on a day already determined that you do not currently know, and every hour you spend absorbing disrespect from someone who has shown you, repeatedly, exactly who they are, is an hour permanently subtracted from a supply that was never as large as you've been living like it was. This isn't abstract. This is the specific, numbered currency you're currently spending on people who have taught you, through their own repeated behavior, exactly how little they'll give back in return. Marcus Aurelius kept a servant specifically to remind him of his mortality, because a man surrounded by people vying for his time and attention is the exact man most at risk of forgetting how finite that time actually is. You don't have a servant reminding you. You have this video, right now, asking you the same question. Who is currently getting access to your finite hours who has never once earned the privilege, and why does that access remain unquestioned? Every boundary you're afraid to set with someone is, underneath the fear, a boundary around how much of your actual, numbered life you're willing to keep handing to someone who has already shown you exactly how they'll spend it. Think about the specific number of evenings you've spent this year on a phone call you dreaded before it even started, giving your finite attention to someone who has never once asked what the call actually cost you. That number is smaller than it feels while you're living it and larger than you'd like once you actually add it up, and none of those evenings are coming back, regardless of how the relationship eventually turns out. Sit with this for 60 seconds. Not to become cold toward the people in your life. To finally see clearly who has earned unlimited access to your time, and who has simply never been told no long enough to assume they always would be. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My time is finite. It goes to those who've earned it. Number 9. The discipline of the view from above applied to what respect actually costs. Zoom out on the specific relationship currently costing you the most respect, and look at it from a height extreme enough to see the actual pattern instead of just the most recent incident. Not the argument from last week. The whole shape of it, across years, the repeated erosion, the repeated apology from you for things that were never actually your fault, the repeated relief you felt every time the tension passed, mistaken for peace when it was actually just postponement. Think about the last time you told a friend about a conflict in this relationship and heard yourself minimizing it out loud, without planning to, the way you always do when you're too close to see the actual shape of something you're standing directly inside of. Your friend probably didn't say anything, or said something gentle you brushed past. But some part of you registered their face when you told the story, and some part of you has known, longer than you've admitted, that the pattern reads differently from the outside than it feels from within it. From that height, most men can finally see what they couldn't see up close, which is that the relationship was never actually testing their patience. It was testing their price, repeatedly, to see if it had changed since the last time, and it kept discovering, disappointingly for them, that it hadn't. This is not about ending every relationship that has ever tested you. It's about seeing the true shape of the pattern clearly enough to finally decide, deliberately, whether the price is one you're willing to keep paying, instead of continuing to pay it by default, the way you have been, simply because nobody ever forced you to look at the full shape of it until right now. Take 60 seconds and zoom out on your most costly relationship today. See the pattern, not just the incident. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I see the pattern, not just the moment. Number 10. The discipline of the unshakable no. Everything before this has been preparation for one specific skill, the actual moment of delivery, because a man can understand every principle in this video perfectly and still fold the instant he's standing in front of the person testing him. The unshakable no is not cruel. It is not loud. It does not require an explanation, an apology, or a justification, though you're free to offer one if you want to. It requires exactly one thing, which is that the no stays a no under pressure, not just in the safety of your own head hours before the conversation happens. Seneca wrote that the wise man says what he means without softening it into something unrecognizable simply because someone else's discomfort has entered the room. This does not mean becoming harsh. It means understanding, finally, that a boundary delivered with kindness and a boundary delivered with weakness are two entirely different things, even though most men, for their entire lives, have been trained to believe they're the same. There is a specific kind of respect that only ever arrives after someone watches a boundary hold under pressure it previously would have collapsed under. Not the respect that comes from being agreeable. A colder, more durable kind, the kind that doesn't require you to be liked in every moment to still be trusted in the moments that matter. Most men have never experienced this kind of respect firsthand, because they've never given anyone the chance to witness a no that actually stayed a no. The first time it happens, you'll feel the shift in the room before anyone says a single word about it. Picture the exact sentence you've used 100 times to cushion a no into something softer, something more palatable, something that gave the other person an opening to push back one more time, because you left the door open yourself without meaning to. That extra sentence wasn't kindness. It was an escape hatch, built into your own boundary by you, and every time you've used it, it's worked exactly the way an escape hatch works, letting the boundary quietly slip closed behind it. The next time you need to say no, say it once, clearly, without 3 additional sentences of apology diluting it into a suggestion instead of a boundary. Let the silence after it sit, even when it feels unbearable. That silence is not you being cruel. That silence is the exact sound of a line finally holding, for what might be the first time in years. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My no is complete. It does not require your approval. 10 disciplines. Not 10 separate tricks for winning arguments, but 10 expressions of the same underlying truth. Respect was never something other people decide to give you, out of nowhere, because you finally deserved it. Respect is something people calculate, constantly, mostly unconsciously, based entirely on the evidence you've given them about what you will and will not allow. You've been handing out that evidence for years, in every small moment you didn't even register as a decision, and the good news, the actual reason this video exists, is that the evidence can change starting with the very next moment you're tested. Marcus Aurelius held his lines while ruling an empire that never stopped testing them. Epictetus held his while owning nothing, including, for years, his own body. Seneca held his while surrounded by men fluent in exactly the manipulation tactics still being used on you today, unchanged, because manipulation hasn't actually evolved much in 2,000 years, only its delivery method has. You have the same raw material they had. A mind capable of judgment. A will capable of holding a line even while every part of you wants to soften it. And people in your life, right now, quietly waiting to discover whether the man they've learned they can move is still the man standing in front of them, or whether something in him has finally, permanently changed. The next time you're tested, and you will be tested soon, possibly today, that's the exact moment these 10 disciplines stop being something you watched and start being something you actually are. Because here's the part that's easy to let slide once this video ends and your regular life resumes around you. Nobody is going to notice the 10 disciplines sitting quietly in your head. They're only going to notice the moment you finally apply one, out loud, in a room, in front of the exact person who spent years learning they could move you. That moment will feel enormous to you and completely unremarkable to them, at first, because they don't yet know anything has changed. That gap, between how significant it feels internally and how invisible it looks externally, is exactly where most men lose their nerve and fold one more time, just to close the gap back up the easy way. Don't close it the easy way. Let the gap sit there, uncomfortable, for as long as it takes the people around you to update what they think they know about you. That updating process is not instant. It took years of evidence to teach them the version of you that negotiates, and it will take more than one held line to unteach it. But it starts somewhere, and it starts exactly where every real change starts, which is with one specific moment where the old pattern was available and you chose something else instead. You already know which of these 10 disciplines is going to get tested first. You could probably name the person's face right now if you let yourself. That's not a coincidence. That's your own life telling you exactly where to start. If any part of this reached something real in you, hold the line in the comments right now, before the resolve fades the way resolve always fades once the video ends and the actual test arrives without warning. And if this changed something in you tonight, hit that like button, send it to the man in your life who's been quietly disappearing into everyone else's expectations the exact way you have, and subscribe to my Stoic code, because a boundary that holds once was never the goal. A man who holds it every single time, starting now, is.